This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law. I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey y'all, I'm Molly Barrows, and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast, where we cover some crazy what the feezy cases that bubble up right here on beautiful Northwest Florida's Gulf Coast, as well as all over the places, because there is no shortage of what the feezy, Pam.
Not a single shortage of it.
That's for sure. And if you're familiar with the show, then you know that Pam Hill is our regular host on here as well. She's a pharmacist and a victim's advocate. She has sadly experienced violent crime in her own family, so she brings a valuable perspective on a number of different levels on some of these stories that we like to talk about. And also, if you haven't liked or subscribed to Gulf Coast Confidential, please do that. We invite you to on YouTube, where we have our Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel, as well as anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts. That's where you can find ours as well. Well, today's episode is called Bloody Nightmare. Sleepwalking teen Benjamin Elliott stabs twin sister to death in waking nightmare. This is about a case out of the Houston, Texas area where a young man from that area was tried for stabbing his twin sister to death in September of 2021. Now, his trial was just earlier this year, but when he stabbed her, both were 17 years old at the time. And during this incident, Benjamin Elliott, now 21, told a 911 operator that he thought he was dreaming when he stabbed his sister to death. But when he woke up, he said he realized it wasn't a dream, that it in fact was a nightmare. And he tried to stop the bleeding when he realized what was really happening. So rescue crews say when they found him, he was performing CPR. But what did a jury think about this? Was there a real medical explanation for what Benjamin did? Was it sleepwalking, or was it just an excuse for premeditated murder? So we're going to talk about more of that in just a minute. But in the meantime, you know, we like to have our hold my sweet tea moment.
Right.
And so we've got a couple of stories that we wanted to talk about. This one is the disappearance of one of the top 10 bodybuilders in the world. Now, I am not that familiar with the world of bodybuilding, but like we've talked about before, it's one of those things that you just have to be dedicated to from the moment that you get up till the time that you go to sleep. You know, what you eat, how you work out. And so this couple, this particular woman, her nickname was the Colombian She-Hulk, and it's making headlines because she disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to her, but now police are zeroing in on her husband, who was also a bodybuilder in that world, and perhaps there was a little bit of jealousy.
Definitely. Her name was Zunilda Hoyas Mendez.
Okay.
And she went by Amy on her social media.
Well, Amy is what I will use.
Yeah. And other people, like you just said, called her the Colombian She-Hulk because she's from Colombia. And they said she was sweet and sweethearted, and, you know, to be the top 10 of anything in the world, you have to be pretty accomplished. But she's very, very physically fit.
Gorgeous. Yeah. Her pictures of her just beautiful.
Yeah. She's built, but she's very, very muscular. And
yes. And some of them look too muscular, but not her. She looked, I mean, obviously sculpted, but she still looked feminine.
Yeah. Now, there are some pictures where she bulk way up because the competitions are different things. I don't know all about it, but I used to do a show with the guy that owned a gym, and just watching what people did, they practiced posing, they practiced showing definition and vasculature and the way that the muscles are smooth and stuff. So it's a discipline. I mean, I've never seen anything like it in my life. The way they eat, sleep, around, stress, everything. So she was trying really, really hard. And she had just come from Dubai. They lived in Dubai. So this is an international case, Dubai. And they were over in Spain vacationing, she and her husband. His name was Jared, and he was a bodybuilder too, and he was a big guy. So they were over there, and she was fixing to go back to Dubai, and everybody kind of knew she was being abused by this big old guy.
Oh, no.
And she is a strong lady. So she was on her way after they went back to Dubai. Her plans were to divorce him. And so he said they had some money invested in cryptocurrency, and he was kind of jealous because he's not the top 10 man. And people loved her, and she was friendly and adorable, and people missed her at the gym. So a few days, people said, well, where is Amy? And they didn't know, so they started looking for her. And then they found her a week later. Jared had beat her to death with a hammer.
Oh, my gosh.
And he had stabbed himself in a fatal way where he killed himself.
Do we know how he stabbed himself?
Not exactly. We're working on this case right now. I just thought since this just happened less than 7 days ago.
That's interesting. I have seen other cases where people have stabbed themselves to death, and one guy did it in the heart that I remember.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how you do either one. How do you pick up a hammer, or how do you pick up a knife? How do you pick up a gun and kill someone, beat them to death, stab them? Even thinking about, like, with my sister, there's times when I just have to stop. If I pick up a knife in the kitchen sometimes, I just cannot use it.
And if you're not familiar with Pam's story or the story of her sister's death by her own son back in 2013, then you can follow Mommy Killer. We've got just a whole series of stories on Pam's nephew's case where he was tried for murder for killing Sharon Adelot, a popular middle school teacher right here in the Panhandle of Florida. Stabbed her, stomped on her face, beat her with his baseball bat, all on Christmas Eve when she was just expecting him to come over and go to a family dinner and a family party. So this is a case that we continue to follow because Brandon was found not guilty by reason of insanity. And as Pam's mentioned, many times, there's so much trauma. You never do get over the loss of a loved one, even under the best of circumstances. But in a violent crime, and to lose them in such a terrible way, it's hard to think about when you really care about someone. And I can see why you would have an aversion to knives like you brought here. We like to keep a lot of props on the table. For those who are listening, basically Pam brought a big, what looks to be like a big hunting knife to me, almost something like you would see Chuck Norris for all my older listeners and viewers out there, or a Rambo style knife.
Exactly. That's what ironically, it's called a survival knife.
Okay. Oh, God.
Yeah, isn't that something? Well, and the reason I wanted to bring this case up is because, all right, he killed her with a hammer. Then he took, his own life. And for all practical purposes, now they'll probably just close the book on that case. This lady, she mattered. Amy mattered. So we're going to look further into her story, and because we are the voice of the voiceless.
That's right. We have a focus on victims on this program. I'm looking forward to learning more about that case. And as in so many instances where we hear about these murder-suicides, I'm like, can you just skip the murder part and go straight to the suicide? If you're the perpetrator, if you're trying to take somebody's life, just go ahead and take yourself out of the game first before you take someone else out. But I hate it for both of them. I wish it hadn't happened for either one of them.
Right. Some sort of psychology or psychopathy or something that goes on during that. And I would like to know what that is. But I mean, in the middle of that, usually selfishness is the prime reason.
Lack of control. I can't control a situation. All right. Well, here's another case that we're following. This is a murder trial in Connecticut nicknamed the Preppy Party Murder Trial. It's about a group of teens who are celebrating graduation, the beginning of summer, having a shindig, if you will, that involved alcohol and not a lot of adults. In fact, these kids were essentially drinking and partying unchecked. And it started with one boy slapping a beer out of another boy's hands. And the next thing you know, it escalates to a crime. So tell us a little bit about what happened there and why this is making headlines.
Right. There's two different schools. The St. Joe kids and the Shelton High School kids is what they say there. One of them slapped, like you said, the beer out of the other one's hand, and the guy got mad. And I got to thinking about that. I mean, it could have been over if he would have just said, okay. But really, when somebody does that to you, I guess there's some indignation in there, even if you're 16 years old. Shouldn't be drinking anyway. But anyway, there was a fight there, then a fight at another house. These kids are going from one house to another. And I had thought back over this, and I thought, when I was going to parties at 16, I better stay at that party. And my mom needed to know how many adults were there. So this is a little different. They don't take it traveling. And so there's a lot of talk back and forth, trash talk and saying, okay, I almost felt like I was watching West Side Story, the Jets and the Sharks or whoever they were. It's like, we got beef type of thing. And so that's what they had. And then there was a guy that got stabbed. Three others got hurt as well in between this mix trying to break this up. And he didn't even go to either one of the schools.
Oh, wow. So the do-gooder, if you will, the guy in the white hat tries to step in and do right by everybody, and he's the one that ends up paying the biggest price.
Right. And it just turned into a fracas free-for-all. I looked at the fight. They kind of showed it, and some of them got their tops off. Some of them are, they're fighting and walking around. And I'm like, do y'all know how ridiculous y'all look? Do you think this is some badass stuff right here? I mean, it was damn ridiculous looking at it.
Well, and it does make me wonder because we do hear about this in so many different cases. We talked about the Apple River stabbing where the man was convicted of killing a teenager because basically these young people were yelling at him, hollering at him, accusing him of being some kind of a pervert because he was looking in this like a popular tubing boating area, if you will, where it's just shallow enough to stand, but he had lost, or one of the people in his party had lost their cell phone. So he had gone back to kind of look for it. And these kids look like to me, maybe some alcohol had been involved as well, but they start hollering at him and he takes it as a threat to his life and ends up just stabbing him, and one of them dies. And it's a tragedy all the way around. And in my opinion, I feel like, sometimes young people, even older people, there's just this. I mean, we talked about the tattoo sucker punch case too, where an older man just sucker punched this guy because he wanted to pick a fight. It seemed like he didn't like he had tattoos. Younger man, easygoing, nice guy, out on date night with his wife. He follows him outside, this angry man, and then punches him, and he ends up dying from this, hitting his head so hard on the cement. And then we have a local case here in Pensacola, a shooting at Mugs and Jugs here in Pensacola, which was a bar that's popular with a lot of young people, young adults. And two women get into a scuffle, if you will, and the boyfriend of one of them, Christian Ketchup, he's charged with murder, but this woman gets knocked to the ground. He sucker punches her, and at least that's what police say, and she falls to the ground. Some say she was entirely unconscious. Some say she was barely conscious. At any rate, he's claiming now stand your ground on behalf of his girlfriend, who had been in a fight with Tiara Benyon, the victim, and Rachel DeRise, and she has since been convicted of a misdemeanor battery in connection with this, which has been outrageous to the Tiara's sister. She feels like that was just a slap on the wrist, less than a slap on the wrist, more like an insult. But Christian Ketchup's trial has yet to start. But that's going to be his defense, according to court documents. He's claiming the stand your ground that he thought that a cell phone in Tiara's shorts was a gun, and that basically he just emptied at least 6 bullets into her body, from what I understand. That number may not be entirely right. I've heard different counts from the sister as well as in the reports, but multiple gunshots went into this young woman. She had no alcohol in her system. And even if you thought your life was in danger, why did you bring a gun to this bar when you're out with your friends, just supposed to be having a good time? Why did you feel like your life was in threat? And why go to a place where you feel like your life is going to be in danger that you have to have a gun? And that's what I think about with this preppy party incident in Connecticut. Connecticut is not a stand your ground law, like we were talking about. You do have basically they expect you to walk away, and it's a de-escalated situation. Why would somebody even have a knife at a party like that?
He went back to the car to get it, so that shows that he had that, that was his thinking. And I also get to thinking about stuff. If you're a hot-tempered person, and we all know who's hot-tempered and who's not, they don't need to be having a knife or a gun just right there. I mean, you've got a young lady supine on her back at Mugs and Jugs, and you feel threatened, and you're a grown man, and you're the one that hit her and knocked her to the ground. I just don't believe that. But you know what? That flim flam rim, that lie, and then die, they do that, and sometimes juries buy that. So, I mean, it's embarrassing to me that you're going to stand up there and say, stand your ground, while she's on her back on the ground.
Well, and that taxpayers are paying the bill for these experts that come in and say, well, he does have good reason to think that she might have been armed. Well, why the hell did you have a gun there to begin with?
Right.
And at least in the Apple River case, the man who was convicted of murdering that person in that case, he had a small pocket knife that he brought with him that he'd had forever. And he brought it with him because they had ropes that they were keeping everything tied together. There was a reason. It wasn't like he had some big survival knife like this thing here, on the table. At any rate, I just don't understand these young people in particular. It seems to be, especially when you add alcohol in the mix, that this is just their way of trying to be macho.
It is. And that's what I say, testosterone Ted jumps out all the time. And basically,
Testosterone Ted.
Testosterone Ted's in all
Him's
this.
bad news.
Him is bad. But, he was here at this party too. But these guys back and forth, this is crazy the way they did it. They're texting their insults back and forth, okay? They're not talking in their face.
That is ridiculous.
I told you it was ridiculous. And then back and forth. And then
oh my gosh.
And then up on the stand, they're like, what was it, your text? And I'm like, seriously? But one of them said, yeah, I texted him. I told him to pull up like that. Okay, so everybody's got to get killed.
So I'm not hip. So pull up, like not pull ups like diapers or pull up your pants, but show up, pull up.
Yeah.
You best be here.
Yeah. That's
mofo
exactly what it is.
kind of a thing.
Yeah. There's talk. Pull up, bro. So that's what he did.
It's so
pulled up. It was dumb. But that's one we're still working on because some of these were lacrosse players and football players. They're all strong, but they were walking around, like I said, like little. Like
do they just not feel adequate in the rest of their life that like any opportunity to act like a macho man can't be resisted?
I think it's this right here.
A little bit of drinking, a little bit of beer pong.
Yeah, a little bit of that. Because one of them was explaining to one of the lawyers how the beer pong, they said, well, we don't use beer anymore on beer pong. We fill the cups up with water because the beer gets nasty when the ping pong ball goes in there, but you have your own beer over here to drink. So I don't even know if you're that hip or not. I'm not. So.
I never did a lot of drinking games. That is not to say that I didn't go out and do my share party. And I mean, I certainly am guilty of that on every level. But like, I don't think that like when I was young, I can't imagine anybody taking anyone seriously. Was like, oh, there's nasty.
But that's what they said.
That's the whole. That's what I mean. That just seems like a generational thing. Like my generation was like, somebody go steal some beer or pay your brother to go buy some beer or whatever. They're going to drink it however they could.
Yeah, they got that part. That's still the retro part. They got to do that part right there. But so the parents, nobody's parents were in the mix and stuff, and 45, 50 years ago, when I was going to 15-year-old parties and stuff, my mother had to know where, and I knew better than to go from party A to party B.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh no,
not going to happen.
I agree. No, that was definitely a different era. But anyway, I'm looking forward to covering.
We're working on both of those.
Dive into that, and then finally, this is the last one that I want to talk about before we get back to Benjamin Elliott case and the sleepwalking murder of his twin sister. But this case is just beyond tragic, and this is less criminal and more civil, but it's something we're going to keep following. So a couple in the Atlanta area, they were awarded $2.25 million in damages. Get this, y'all. After a jury ruled that a pathologist violated their privacy by posting graphic autopsy videos of their decapitated baby on social media. And this is according to the couple's attorneys. It just doesn't get any more tragic than this. This young mother, 20 years old, had a particularly difficult delivery where her infant essentially got stuck during a prolonged vaginal delivery. Well, when doctors realized that this baby just wasn't coming, they performed an emergency C-section. This is according to court documents. But tragically and horrifically, the child's head was delivered vaginally and the rest of the baby was taken by C-section. So as horrific as that is, the parents didn't even know that's what had happened to their child. They didn't know until the baby was sent to the funeral home to be prepared for a funeral. And the funeral home basically called the parents and was like, you do realize this baby is in pieces? And they're like, what? No, we had no idea this was happening. So they hired this independent pathologist named Dr. Jackson Gates to perform a private autopsy after this traumatic delivery, which happened basically almost 2 years ago, July of 2023. And they hire him. And then a couple days later, he had posted videos of this baby's autopsy, graphic pictures of this child's remains. And the family is just devastated and horrified when they learned of it because, again, they didn't know until the funeral home told them that the baby had been decapitated. And by the way, there is a separate lawsuit against the hospital and the delivery doctor, and that is ongoing. But this particular case was against the pathologist for posting these graphic videos. And he never responded to their lawsuit. So under the law, basically, it automatically defaulted to the benefit of the plaintiffs. And in this case, the parents won. But there was a jury trial to determine damages. And that's how they came up with the 2.25. So they won this. But after the result of the jury verdict awarding them this money, Dr. Gates said that it was basically a travesty of justice, a miscarriage of justice, what they'd found, because he said he didn't intend for that to ever, that he was devastated that that it had caused so much pain to the family, but that he regularly posts videos of autopsies for educational purposes, and he did not identify the parties involved. So essentially, he didn't think they were going to see it. He didn't think that they would know that was their child, but there aren't a lot of decapitated babies out there, I certainly hope. So I can certainly see why somebody could easily make that connection. That's just my opinion. But it's a heartbreaking situation all the way around. It goes to show you once again just how dangerous natural childbirth really is on so many levels. But I'm looking forward to seeing how the lawsuit progresses against the hospital and the delivery doctor as to how something like this could even happen. But nobody, I don't think, goes into a situation like that going, safety be damned. I can't wait to see if this baby lives or dies. I can't help but think this is obviously, a tragedy for everyone involved, but I will be interested in learning more about what exactly happened that led to this.
My question is where did ethics go? Or, who would even do that? That is so disrespectful. And I understand about things that, for learning and this, that, and the other, but that's beyond decency. I was an instructor in cadaver lab, and I would have to send people out a lot that thought some of that stuff was funny. I'm like, well, since you think this is so funny, study it in the hall.
Yeah.
By yourself with a book. And by that time, that is disrespectful. And if you can't act any better than that, you can't be in here. That story's made me sick.
Oh, it was awful. And I just, a friend of mine, Marie, reached out when she saw this and she goes, hey, this might be something for you to watch for the podcast. And I think she's absolutely right. And just, for those folks out there, if you come across a story that you feel like is, something that you would like to learn more about, or you'd like to see us cover here on Gulf Coast Confidential, please feel free to email myself, Molly at mollybarrows.com, or you can also reach out to Pam. We're both on social media, particularly active we're on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, but you can find Pam under Pie.
That's right.
Pam Hill is Pie on
right.
Facebook.
Yeah.
And then I've got a couple of them on Facebook as well, personal as well as professional, but you'll see the difference. There's one of me and my daughter for my personal one.
That's your personal
The professional one is,
Yeah.
Meaghan with a little more like professional, with a jacket.
The professional.
But we would love to hear from you if you have any stories that you would like for us to cover. But yeah, just wrapping that up, basically the Clayton County Medical Examiner's Office that did the original autopsy on this baby did determine that this child's death was a result of a homicide, which basically just means that a human action caused this child to die. So that's what I'm saying. Well, we'll continue to follow that part of it and see, where that case leads.
Yeah.
But
not enough. 2.25 is not enough.
Oh, and for the pathologist, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's just for the pathologist.
Right.
We'll see what happens with the death of the baby.
I'm done.
I know, and we'll be praying for them for sure. Well, now back to the case that we're focusing on today, talking about Benjamin Elliott out of Texas. He's 21 years old now, and earlier this year, he was tried for the murder, a deadly stabbing of his twin sister. And we're going to talk about the results of that trial here in a minute. But first, let's talk about exactly what happened, because his defense was that he was sleepwalking when he did it. And that in the middle of stabbing her to death, he realized that it was not a dream, not a nightmare, as he told people, and that it was actually happening. And so then he claims that he tried to stop the bleeding with a pillow and et cetera, et cetera. And Pam's got those details for us. But I tell you what, I don't know how that has to be in you. We did that other podcast episode of the young woman that did some medical marijuana or whatever kind of marijuana it was. I don't think it was medical marijuana. It was just some other kind of marijuana. Recreational marijuana. And then she just freaked out and stabbed this young man that she was dating until there was just a hole in his chest where his heart had been. And I'm thinking to myself, that still has to be in you.
108 stabs.
108 stabs. That's the name of that episode if you want to check it out. But yeah, that and she got pretty light sentence.
Almost
She's already
like probation.
Yeah, like he was like, well, the drugs messed her up, but we're gonna but I just feel like whether it's recreational marijuana, whether it's, sleepwalking, whatever the excuse is that you're not in your right mind when you do something like this. And I know you're familiar with that too. Going back to Brandon, your nephew and your sister's son killing her. That has to be in you to a certain extent anyway. I do think there's different levels of mental illness, some more severe and more disconnected from reality than others. But sleepwalking, there's part of me that's like, what else was happening with their relationship?
Well, that's what you have to look at, a whole lot of things. And sleepwalking is sleepwalking, obviously, but something known as parasomnias, is the sleepwalking and the stuff you do. You know, being a pharmacist, I hear all kind of stories about Ambien and other sleep medications, and most of the sleep medications are not meant for long-term use. They're meant for about 14 days. And so Ambien, it works. It almost works too good. It's a good drug, but we got to use it how it's meant to be. And some people have been on Ambien for a long time, and I'm not going to argue about that. That may be what they need, because the cruelest thing and the hardest thing is when you can't sleep. I mean, it's miserable to people. You can't restore. You can't get any energy back. You can't think. It's just like it's horrible. And a lot of us do something like that to ourselves in college. I did. When we were studying this, I got to thinking, when I was about 23, I had gone to Europe, and I'd come back, and I looked on my doorstep there, and I had a package from Sports Illustrated. I was like, what? And then another package I had there, and it was from Feed the Children, or Feed Our Children. And my mom was right here, and Mother said, what is that? And I said, well, I don't know, let's go inside. Open it up. I opened it up. It was a football phone that opens up like this, and you could talk on it. I mean, it was bizarre. I ordered that in my sleep, and I made a donation to Feed Our Children in my sleep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, at least it was kind of good on my part.
I was about to say, your heart was in the right place, and you were wanting to talk to people.
Right. Well, I used to sleep with my TV on. I would study. I'd get so mad when I couldn't study anymore, because I'd be doing like this to keep my eyes open.
Holding your eyes open.
And I would just get angry, because I thought sleeping is such a waste of time. You know, I got stuff to do. So anyway, I had kind of, that's what had happened. I had run myself down, and all that was in my head, and it did something. I had to get up and get my credit card back then, you know, and punch it in and do what you do. So anyway, that got my attention with this too. So we've got Benjamin, who's 17, and his twin sister Meaghan. Obviously, she's 17 as well. They live in Katy, Texas. His parents' name, he's got Michael and Kathy are his parents. Little family unit of 4 right there. They have a big sister named Elizabeth that she lives somewhere else. She doesn't live in the house with them. So
good thing.
Yeah. This was on September 28th, 2021. During the day, they had earlier in the week, the twins had stayed home. They were sick. So this is later in the week. So on this day, they were just kind of at home, just sitting around. So the dad and the son had been playing video games. So we're going to jump on to about 6 to 11 at night.
Dad and Benjamin.
Yeah. They're playing video games. That's what they like to do. Benjamin and Meaghan are both kind of nerdy and goofy. Meaghan's on the spectrum a little bit, and so is Benjamin a little bit, but not as much as Meaghan. And Meaghan had been diagnosed with some mental illness. I don't know what it was. They didn't say what that was. And also during that day, they'd had dinner, and so everybody was kind of nesting. And his dad, they loved knives and swords and the things, the metal and stuff of all the kind of weapons. And I mean, just because I don't understand that doesn't mean that they shouldn't do it, but
sure.
I don't understand it. But, you know, I collect beanie babies.
I've heard of other people, too, that collected swords. And sometimes it's in that, you know, following the different fantasy realms, if you will, the different storytelling. Like, you know, in my era, that would have been Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. But now there's video games and all sorts of mythology, fantasy storylines. And people, I think, enjoy collecting swords and weapons that sort of fall in line with those storylines, it seems like.
Yeah.
And again, I don't get it, but I've seen
remember that sword that you put a post on about the sword at Pensacola Beach?
Oh my gosh, I forgot all about that. Y'all, I did a story. It's probably about 2 years ago now, and it was just kind of going viral, if you will, on social media. Here on the Gulf Coast, if you're not familiar with it, well, let me just take a moment to brag. It's so pretty around here.
It is.
We have snow white beaches, beautiful Emerald Coast waters. In fact, that's why they call it the Emerald Coast, and because it's crystal green and just it's beautiful. We have the most beautiful beaches in the world. I dare anyone to say that their beaches are prettier than ours. But so, you know, because it's so clear, you can often see things. You know, we also have dangerous rip currents. We've, you know, that's a whole nother story, but I don't want to, I just feel like I got to put that in there. If you're going to come down and visit and enjoy our beautiful beaches, also just be aware and pay attention to the flags, because it can be dangerous. But on a beautiful, you know, green flag day, when the water's crystal clear, that's what one couple found when they were strolling along in our area. And they looked down and saw the hilt, if you will, the handle of an old sword. And they pulled it up out of the water and realized, sure enough, and then they had called basically one of our local archaeology offices and said, hey, I've got this sword. Here's a couple of pictures of it. Let me describe it to you. And you know, they'd have to inspect it in person to decide what it is and how old it is and if it's legit. But they said it appeared to be of a certain age, but it didn't have a lot of barnacle growth on it. It didn't have a lot of other things that you would have if it had been in the water for any length of time. So we have hurricanes that hit regularly, and what they suspect, because this couple, even though they called, they never did really bring it in for a physical inspection, and they didn't respond to my requests and other media requests for interviews. I think they had stumbled across something valuable, and it went viral so quick, so fast. They kind of went into lockdown mode. I ain't talking about this sword with nobody.
Get out of here, Molly Barrels.
Right. I'm sitting on King Arthur's sword and nobody's going to take it. I mean, I don't know if that's what they thought or not, but they didn't respond, and you know, good on them, whatever they want to do. But that story ended up getting picked up nationwide because everyone's like, a sword? I mean, you know, like eating popcorn. Like there's images of King Arthur. And that's how I started it. I said it was no sword in the stone, more like a sword in the sand. But when this man pulled it out, it went viral. And the emails that I got from people all over the country basically saying, I saw your story on the sword, and here's a book on swords, and here's what it could have been. And there's a house that had a collector in the area of swords and that got mowed down by the hurricane, and could have been some of his swords that he'd collected that ended up in the Gulf. But let me tell you, men love to talk about swords, and I had no idea.
Now you do.
Till that story. So to your point, that was pretty crazy.
Yeah,
People do have a fascination with knives and swords and different types of weapons, even guns, as we know as well. But yeah, the sword thing really kind of surprised me.
And it's something you just said, King Arthur, and it rang in my head. The parents like to dress up like King Arthur during that time.
So like Renaissance fair type folk.
Yeah. And I think that the kids, they called them the children's rooms down, you know, when they'd say children instead of kids, we say kids here, don't we?
Yeah.
And so Benjamin had said he was, listen to this, enamored with that knife. His dad's survival knife.
I wonder why you would be enamored with it.
I wonder why you'd choose that word. You know, fascinated too is even something, but appreciate it. You know, he could appreciate it. And maybe the fact that his dad was. And Benjamin and Meaghan were both a little bit goofy acting, but they were sweet. People said they were so sweet. And Benjamin could be a little more sardonic and sarcastic like that. And Meaghan, she wasn't necessarily. She's just she liked doing art. So we got the two twins, the parents that kind of let them do their thing, and the parents that are a little bit quirky too.
Interesting. Well, hold that thought,
okay,
because we're going to dive into a little bit more about their relationship and what was happening before this terrible event happened and he stabbed his sister in her sleep. We do want to take a moment to recognize Zarzar Law, personal injury attorney Joe Zarzar here in Pensacola area, which covers Escambia and Santa Rosa counties and well beyond, actually. He has covered a lot of cases in and around the state of Florida, but he is basically one of our best personal injury attorneys here in the area, in my opinion, and we appreciate his support of Gulf Coast Confidential. You know, we talk about victims on the show so many times, and that is what personal injury attorneys do. They represent victims because just like what happened to your sister Sharon, although that was criminal, there are lots of times in the civil realm, just like the couple that we talked about earlier, who lost their baby potentially due to what, according to the Clay County Medical Examiner's Office, homicide. So they're filing a lawsuit in that case as well. But these things happen. These are extreme examples, but every day, whether it's a car accident, a slip and fall, maybe some other product or a medication that somebody's taken that has caused someone to feel hurt them in some way, whether it's hurt their body, it's hurt their ability to make a living, it's hurt their ability to have a quality of life with their loved ones, you know, be with their family. So many things can happen that through no fault of our own, we are injured.
Right.
And the system is set up not necessarily to bend over backwards for the victims. That's why we speak for the victims on this show. And Joe Zarzar is one of those that speaks for the victims when it comes to people that have been hurt through no fault of their own, because they can be a voice for the voiceless. They can stand up to big insurance companies. They can stand up to corporations that oftentimes knowingly put a product out there that could potentially hurt someone. So we just want to, again, let folks know that if sadly and tragically, hopefully that never happens to you. But if you do have some sort of injury or a medical malpractice claim or hurt in a car accident, whatever the reason, and you need to talk to a personal injury attorney, Joe Zarzar is who I would call.
Oh, definitely.
Zarzar Law. And you can check out just the whole list of multi-million-dollar settlements and verdicts that he has gotten on behalf of his clients. And they also offer free consultations. So it's a good person to start there if you're trying to decide what your next steps are in case you have been injured.
Right. And he's a tiger. He goes after the right is right, wrong is wrong. But hey, what do you do on Tuesdays between 2 and 4 during the summer?
Well, probably stay inside where it's cool.
Okay. Well, how about come to Zarzar Law? Joe has this free Z where these are shaved ice. It's not the grandma's snow cone. And you can go down there from right now until August the 5th. And Stella and I went down there the other day, and you can get any flavor of shaved ice you want. Look at this big old cup.
That is fantastic.
There, yeah, pick out and down there, it's just a time for folks to get there. Folks are right there on Romano Street, sitting there being cool. You know, all the cool people are there.
I know, I love it. He's right in the heart of downtown Pensacola, our hip and happening spot there on Palafox.
Right.
Well, that's a great idea. That's a good way to beat the heat and also just get down there and have a little fun on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, and it's free. 100% free. Moms, dads, kids, whatever. But it's called the Free Z like Zarzar, and you can pick any flavor you want. I'm going to be there this Tuesday.
Fantastic. Well, if I don't make it, I want you to send me a picture of your tongue afterwards. Because whatever the shaved ice is, I feel like I have this collection of pictures over the years because I do love me some shaved ice and different types of what do you call them?
Snowballs?
Snowballs. Yeah, like snowballs or, whatever. But I always end up in the mirror I want to see.
Mick Jagger.
If it's like red, right, exactly. Not nearly as skinny or as talented as Mick Jagger. But at any rate, no, that's a great idea. We'll have to check that out. I'm glad you got a chance to go by there. And Freezy Tuesday sounds like a fun idea.
That's where I'll be.
All right. Well, let's get back to our story now. So we took a little break from talking about Benjamin Elliott. Family was into, it sounds like a little bit of, fantasy, following those stories. King Arthur, they like the swords, but nobody would ever, there's a lot of families that like that and participate in it, and they don't murder each other.
Right.
So what happened in this case?
Well, what had happened is that Benjamin, he had, like I said, stayed up late, and he had trouble sleeping. He has sleep apnea. He's a bigger boy. He had sleep apnea, and he would stay up on his phone like a lot of us do. Almost dare anybody to say they didn't do it, but we do it. And so he had waken up during the night there. I don't think he went to bed. So he's on this particular night, the 29th by now, because it's after midnight. He is on his phone, playing around on his phone. And then he's looking at Reddit, looking at YouTubes, and his sister's in her room. Their rooms are sort of like these newer houses that have the kids' rooms on one side and the parents are on the other. So they're on that side of the house. But their rooms, I think, are right next to each other. So he's doing all this. And then at 4:06 a.m., he unplugs his phone. And at 4:08 a.m., he takes 18 feet, goes 18 feet. That's they said, the distance from his door to his sister's door. Okay. So they said that he was probably going over there to see if she was awake. And she was asleep. And then at 4:17, his phone was locked. And then we don't hear again about his phone until 4:41. So in between there is when he had taken the sheath of the knife, that's this cover here, and threw it on his bed, and he went to his sister's room with a big survival knife.
So he unsheathed the knife before he walked across the hall.
Right. Threw it on his bed, took the survival knife, and he goes in there, and he stabs his sister in the neck.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just, it's hard to come back from that.
It's almost making me sick to say it.
Yeah, it just hurts my heart. I know, especially after what happened to Sharon.
Yeah, and that's what I think about. He stabbed her in the neck, and then he stabs her again in the neck. Now, here's where things get iffy and what's going on. Okay, they say he stabbed her in the jugular. If he stabbed her in the jugular, that blood would be spurting out if he didn't put his hand over it or put something over it. So they say that he took a pillow and put this over her face.
So Pam's got a pillow for our listeners.
Yeah.
She's basically demonstrating.
Right. So he's putting that over the face, and he pulls the knife out because that blood would have went everywhere.
Sure.
There
would have been spray.
Right. There's no blood spatter anywhere in her room. There's 3 little places there. So what happens is he comes to, he said. So he comes to, and he turns on the light, trying to keep pressure, and all the details get mixed around like that. It's either he did pressure and turned on the light or something, but he's being quiet. He's not screaming for parents. She's not screaming because when he stabbed her, she gargled and she did as what he called a half scream.
Oh, bless her heart. My gosh, what a nightmare to come up out of your sleep and see your brother stabbing and you can't even holler for the blood.
Yep. And she probably can't see him because the pillow's over her eyes.
Oh, no.
And she's fighting there. So that goes on, and all of a sudden, he gets his phone and he just dials 911 and tells them, and this is where the prosecution and defense are different. The prosecution says, he's whispering, saying, "My name's Benjamin Elliott. I just killed my sister." And so then the defense is saying, he says, "I'm Benjamin Elliott. I just killed my sister." Well, imagine all this. The parents are on the other side of the house. The dad doesn't hear anything until he hears the 911 operator's voice. That's what made him come across the house to come in the room.
So it was loud enough to hear the 911 operator. She was loud enough, or he,
Right.
and then the son was still pretty quiet.
Yeah. It was a lady dispatch telling him what to do. And so when the dad comes in there, Benjamin's on top of her on the bed, giving her CPR. Okay, again, with this jugular vein and all that. So I don't know what all's happening in there before the dad came over. So between 4:17 and 4:41, because that's when the 911. So they're saying between that time, about that 30 minutes right there, or 20-ish, 25, is when all this happened. So when the dad comes in, he is petrified. His name is Michael. He sees Meaghan. He says she's not doing well. She looks gray. Her lips are blue. By the time Daddy gets over. Okay, so that had to be a minute.
She was dying. She was, she was pronounced dead when emergency crews got there.
Right, and they got there within 10 minutes, the EMS did. They got there, and when they walked in, they said, they didn't do anything with him. They just let him keep doing the CPR. And to me, I'm like, that's not how that typically is. They usually come right in and they'll bump their shoulders and bump you off so they don't miss a compression, But I think, and nobody said this, but I think they knew that she was already deceased, and they were shocked as well. Imagine, just because they're first responders doesn't mean that they're immune to seeing ridiculous stuff and horrible stuff that they walk into.
The trauma that firefighters, EMTs see. Yes, they have high incidence of suicide. There's actually efforts to try to deal with some of that because of the trauma that they see. But that is a particularly horrific scene to walk in, and here's a family, a brother on top of his sister trying to perform CPR for an act that he just committed.
Right. And on her bed, and the dad had run across the house to get Kathy, the mom, because he said she's got more experience with this life-saving stuff than I do. And I'm just like, how do you not, I'm not trying to be judgmental, but I'm trying to think, I would never leave. I would just I'd be screaming right there. And so the emergency guys, the dad, this, that, and the others going on. And then a little while later, the police get there. It's not a huge period of time, but they get there. And the dad and the mother have already called a lawyer to come over. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, and the police are in there and they're wanting to talk to Benjamin. So they handcuff him and they're taking him out of the house. And they said to him, basically, I'll treat you with respect and you treat me with respect. He said, I don't deserve any respect. I just killed my sister.
Interesting.
So this is 2 or 3 times he's already said he's killed his sister. So they get to the police station and they're asking him, where's your phone? Do you mind? Here's where search warrants comes in. And the parents are pushing back going, yeah, you can search the house. You can search his phone, but you need a search warrant. I mean, this is all happening right now. That
the wagons were immediately circling around the survivor, the surviving child.
Right.
But it's tough. I mean, I can't even imagine you're as a parent, you love your children, whatever they may do, but he did kill one of their other children. So, I mean, there's part of me that would be like, go ahead, let's find out what the heck happened. But then I guess there's that part that says, can I trust the police to do a good investigation? I don't know. I mean, I put myself in their shoes, I'd probably want to contact an attorney too. But at the same time, that immediately makes me think, well, do you know something we don't? You know, is there something that he did do, or were you aware of any issues that potentially could have led to this? I don't know that, but that's just where my mind goes.
Right. Well, I mean, I've been in their shoes.
You have.
I've been in their shoes, and all I can remember hearing is getting a phone call that said, Pam, don't say anything. Sharon's dead and Brandon killed her. I couldn't drive to Gulf Breeze fast enough. I didn't care how I drove. I just was getting there. And when I pulled up and saw all the lights and police and this, that, and the other, definitely no ambulance there because Sharon was already deceased. You're stunned. I probably didn't think to talk about an attorney about anything till weeks later because I'm like, my sister's laying in there dead with knives in her eyes and knives in her neck, you know, beaten to death. I'm having to learn this way. And I mean, I guarantee you a lawyer was not what I was thinking about.
I hear you on all of that. Yeah, that's an interesting reaction on the part of the parents.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. So they ask him when they're interviewing him, you know, what went on? What'd you do? And he said, you know, told him about he missed school early in the week and he had taken some over-the-counter cold medicine and that he has the SATs coming up. And he's excited about that. He told him about this knife and how he was enamored with it. He said that twice, is enamored with the knife.
Do we think maybe he might have been fantasizing about using it on someone?
I think so, because they asked him too, basically like, why? He said, I just stabbed her and he did a
But to go
thing.
For the neck.
Yeah.
Like that's a death shot right there. You're trying to hurt somebody. That's what Brandon did to Sharon.
I know. And I can't even imagine somebody putting that in their head and, you know, little girl's asleep and he
totally
goes in
helpless.
There. Yeah. My sister's opening her door to her
who he
child.
claims to love. And I guess by the family's testimony, they had previously been close, as often twins are.
They're twins. They're almost like inseparable. And they said that he would protect her and that, you know, and this is where when they tell these stories, you know how I get. They're like, well, one time when they were walking, he kept an umbrella over her head. Well, one time he stabbed her in her neck when she was sound asleep.
Right.
You know, and it's not me trying to be assy. That stuff is stupid to me, you know?
Well, and you know, like you and I were talking earlier when we were talking about doing this story, it's one thing for him to say, hey, calling 911, I was stabbing her. I thought it was a nightmare. It actually was really happening. As soon as I came to, I called you guys. And then he tells the the sheriff's office or the police that are on scene, I don't deserve any respect. I killed my sister. But then he goes and pleads not guilty.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, well, if so freely admit it, then why don't you freely accept responsibility for what you've done? But suddenly it becomes this, what is it, parasomnia?
Parasomnias, where people, you're sleepwalking, you're eating, or you're cooking, or you're gardening, or you're driving, you're having sex, or you're doing a lot, watching TV and not even being there.
Midnight gardening. That's exactly what happened to me. If there's anything, I'd be repotting. I'd be like, oh, wow, this one needs a bigger pot. This one needs
That's
whatever.
That's what's on your mind, though. And that is why, like, when I ordered that phone from Sports Illustrated and donated Feed the Children, obviously that was what was on my mind at night because I was half watching it and half not, obviously. So now I don't sleep with my TV on anymore because heaven knows. But
you might get all kinds of cool stuff.
Or
you ordered
maxed out. But yeah, and so when he's talking to the police and stuff, they're like, so where is that phone? He goes, back at the crime scene. 17 and a half years old, back at the crime scene.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so that's pretty telling to me.
Do you think that's, yes, telling on a couple different levels, but then I immediately think that he's on the spectrum a little bit. So is there a lack of emotional response, perhaps, that is consistent with being on the spectrum?
I don't know, and I hesitate to say because I just don't know.
Right, I'm not an expert on those things either.
But the thing is, I think when we, like you were talking about, you're thinking about the pots and stuff, or somebody else might be, thinking about I didn't finish decorating my Christmas tree and get up doing that in the middle of the night.
Or I have these, work assignments done, or these school assignments I need to finish.
Right. So that's why it's so important. So I wear my pajama top today. Don't look any different than my regular clothes, does it? 'Cause I like paisley.
Pam's a paisley fan.
I am. I wear paisley and houndstooth together. But
I like it.
Thank you. But anyway, it's one of the things of whatever's in your head when you go to sleep at night. So, this is one thing that I was listening to too, that his sanctuary or his sleep area, he had the knife on the bedstand. And that's one of the things about parasomnias is that when someone wakes up from a parasomnia, they're usually amnestic. They have a little bit of amnesia. They're not going to remember, I just stabbed her in the neck. And he didn't remember the first stab. They said he remembered the second one because he remembered how it felt. I felt like my knife went into something. And then also, when you wake up someone that is sleepwalking, typically, not always, they are combative or they'll fight back. That's why we gently usually take them back to their room, And this had happened with him before. His older sister, Elizabeth, had said that he had sleptwalked into, the door of her room, and she just gently tapped him on the shoulder and turned him back around and sent him to his room. Then this is what the defense likes to bring up too. Or they're like, hey, one time when he was 12, he was at a slumber party, and they even had a friend get up on the stand, and they said that they caught him in the middle of the night eating a donut, and he was asleep. And I'm like, well, he could have got caught eating a donut and someone's going to get mad or whatever.
Right. Well, and that's quite the stretch between eating a donut with sprinkles like we got sitting here and then picking up, Rambo's knife and going after your sister.
Right. And that was when he was 12. And they didn't have it diagnosed or go any further with any kind of parasomnia reporting to the doctor or anything like that. So, all of us could think of somebody in our family that sleptwalked before, and we just kind of gently put them back in their room.
I never have experienced anybody that has done sleepwalking shenanigans.
Yeah. When my sister was little, she would sleepwalk, and in her mind, Mother would just turn her around, and we had to put chairs in the hall.
Wow.
Past a lot of them, so it would wake my mother up. And she would say, I got to go to school. So it was school.
She had goals. Bless her.
Yeah. So it was that. And I saw that firsthand, and we all just stayed quiet, and Mom just take her back to her room.
The jury did convict him. And I think it's interesting that one of those neurologists that testified, Dr. Gerald Simmons, said, quote, I think the jury got it wrong. It's totally possible. If it wasn't possible, I would not have taken the position. There are other cases. They are rare, but they can occur. So he was basically testifying in defense of what he had done, saying he could have done it and not known.
Well, expert witnesses again. Here we are.
Well, and they can all be paid for depending on what the viewpoint is that they need to
look
deliver.
Look at it this way, look at it that way. Well, and also I love expert witnesses. I listen to them and try to see what they're thinking, because typically it's scientific stuff that they're talking about. And on here, one of them was an expert that had written a book and said, you should always do this, this, this. And they didn't do that. The people that the defense and the prosecution. Anyway, it was two kind of bumbling people to me. I was just like, y'all should just kept both of them off and let's just go, because it was something else. And then the defense and the prosecution had two different styles. The prosecution came out like, he's trying to cover this up. He's telling stories. He said the crime scene, everything that they could, as a prosecution will do. And then the prosecution, the daddy, the mama, the sister, they had the sister by Zoom. And by the way, this case right here, I have never heard so much coughing in my life in this courtroom. So many people coughing, and then I got to wondering, is that the defense doing that? Because they do some crazy stuff sometimes.
It's funny. I just came back from an investigative journalism conference in New Orleans, and there was one session early in the morning.
8 o'clock?
It was 9 o'clock, actually. It wasn't that early. I did have one the day before for 8 a.m., and I was like, Lord have mercy. And but no, it's really not that early. But it was the first of the day, this 9 a.m. one, and I got there, right as it was just about to start, and I felt so annoyed, if you will, because people just kept coming in and out and in and out. And you just kept hearing the doors like, and then, and I'm like, for God's sakes, go investigate us somewhere else. I've had enough. But I thought, this is what happens when you don't have enough coffee or breakfast.
Fixing to say.
I was annoyed. I was not like, going to walk in my sleep with a survival knife or anything, but I do know what you mean.
Right.
You're like, for heaven's sakes, we're all just trying to listen and pay attention.
Right.
Take a lozenge.
Right. And exactly. And usually the judge stops a lot of that when people are doing that, because in the Karen Reed trial, when I was watching that, defense lawyers they just have to come up with some stuff sometimes. And there was a fan behind them. And so when the person they were, interviewing, interrogating, questioning, whatever the word is, up there, if they said something that they really, really, really needed someone to say, they'd go, now, what was that you said? There's a fan back here, and I couldn't hear it. I need to hear that again. So it's just that, making
an
stuff
excuse
happen.
to hammer home a point.
So they did that, and, the pharmacist in me is going, you need to go get some Mucinex with dextromethorphan and not the candy kind of cough drop.
Right. Or maybe just stay home.
That's right. If it's the lawyer, though.
No, they can come in, but you're right.
Yeah.
Fix it.
So anyway, that was going on, and the judge, he didn't wear a robe. He's this handsome black man, and he wore a scarf and a suit. So he was a little bit...
He was dapper.
Yeah, he was dapper. And he was a little bit different because back and forth, he gave them all a lot of leeway in their opening and closing, which they're supposed to have. Mm-hmm. Those are their opinions. But the parents are sitting on the defense side. Over here is Meaghan with the prosecution. Well, they did some things that were hard for the parents. When they were questioning the dad, the lady went up there, the prosecutor, and she handed him a picture, and she said, "Who is that?" And he said, "That's Meaghan." And he could hardly say it. And then I just thought, oh my gosh, that was just so hard for him. Mm-hmm. And then she said, "I have no more questions." Like that. And I was just like, my goodness. So, they wanted to see the emotion. Obviously, they loved their daughter too. But then when she was doing her closing, she said, everybody's here for Benjamin and not a single person here for Meaghan. And they got rowdy out there in the
I think
thing.
That's right on, because that is just the nature of the beast. I mean, he pled not guilty, and the parents are there supporting him. I mean, we don't know that they told him to plead guilty.
Right.
If they're talking about calling a lawyer from the moment that it happened, again, not passing judgment, have not been in that situation. But that prosecutor has every right to say that. And that is absolutely the truth in every case involving homicide, in my opinion, because it immediately becomes about the person who is accused of the crime.
Right. And she's the state. They are prosecuting for the state of, Texas. And Texas is
don't play.
Hard-ass. That's right. You don't play. Benjamin was looking at 99 years, and the prosecution asked for 40. The defense asked for 5. And so he was pretty smart. His phone had passwords on it. He was enamored with a knife. They got a lawyer, all kind of stuff, making Benjamin be the main one. Who's speaking for Meaghan?
That's exactly right. Well, here's a couple other points I thought were interesting. So prosecutors argued that the evidence did not support his claim that he was sleepwalking. They said there was evidence that he knew exactly what he was doing. And some of what they pointed to was that he was awake. They say he was awake when he killed her and on his phone before the killing. His phone even logged his steps, as you pointed out, to and from his sister's bedroom. They said he was conscious enough to turn his school alarm off and to call 911, and they also believe he used that pillow to muffle her screams. And like you said, that's another reason why we probably didn't see the blood evidence on the walls that would have come from getting someone in the jugular. So this is what one of the prosecutors said, Meaghan Long, quote, "While I didn't give you motive, I did give you premeditation. It's not a coincidence that the knife he got the night before is the same knife he used to kill his sister," said Meaghan Long during closing arguments. "Mr. Rucker and I have disproven what they have tried to sell you, their narrative. We don't have a burden. We don't have to prove anything, but who is putting forth the proof? It is not them." And this is from the defense attorney, Carrie Lynn Higginbotham. That's her counter to what Meaghan Long had to say when she said it was the same knife used to kill his sister. So it sounds to me like the jury was torn. Even though they did convict him, they did ask the court for leniency. The judge said, please, be lenient, because it is tough. I mean, on some level, let's just say that there's no doubt that he killed her.
Right.
So I don't think it was a stretch to convict him. But if they do believe that maybe there is some reason, this parasomnia, whatever the hell, it sounds like bullshit
Parasomnia.
to me. Yeah, parasomnia. I immediately think Ghostbusters whenever I hear something like that. But
well, it is. You're not awake. typically doing that. And I mean, all the things that he did, the coming back so quickly, you usually don't remember. You would be horrified and shocked. You wouldn't have the wherewithal to call 911.
And to whisper?
Yeah. And
You
to
know?
be doing, I mean, I saw the girl, she was so pale. And
I'd be
see the
hollering
body
for our
cam.
parents, oh my God, what happened? Call 911, blah, 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 you know?
Well, that's our house all the time. When I was a little girl, we just yelled across the house. I can't imagine.
Totally. I still yell across that. Vivian, what do you want for breakfast? You know?
See, and they're separate right there.
Right.
You know? So, yeah, that all was just unbelievable. But the jury deliberated for 5 hours, and the judge gave him 15 years because even the defense said, well, either he's a psychopath or has parasomnia. Well,
maybe he's a psychopath with parasomnia.
yeah, the jury did say. And I often wonder, how does that note get to the judge? Do they write it on the bottom of the jury slip? Like, we find him guilty, but
we
easy
feel
on him.
sorry for him.
Yeah,
that's the bottom
right.
line.
Well, he was 17 and a half, and he would sit with his hand like this, and I almost
Like
thought,
he made his hand to a fist and would prop his chin up on
right.
it.
And like he's just got inappropriate affect with stuff. And part of that may be his being on the spectrum. But I was just waiting at a certain time. But see, this is where, like, those of us that are watching, we're making judgments, and sometimes they're not correct. But, you know, who knows? Did they want him to sit there, like, you know, crying or whatever? But this has all been so weird.
Oh,
this is just a wonky case to me.
Well, he does not have a criminal history, which of course goes to sentencing. And then he had no issues while he was out on bond. And they said those were some of the factors that they used in determining that 15-year sentence. But like you said, I mean, in Texas, murder carries a punishment of 5 to 99 years in prison. So Elliott will be eligible for parole in about 7.5 years. And he's certainly not going to be the same person that he was when he walked in there.
And that's what his dad said. Somebody said, well, he has no remorse, the prosecution. And he said, y'all don't know.
I was about to say, we don't really know.
Yeah, because he said he literally had to put his hands on Benjamin's face when he was taking him home. He's been out on bail before he got convicted. He said he had to take his hands on the side of his face. The parents seem real loving and sweet.
Sure, yes.
They seem a little bit non-traditional, but everybody's different. That's what makes things cool. Everybody's family's a little different. He said he looked him straight in the eyes and said, hey, you know, had to get him to come back to him.
Wow, just to focus in and pay attention. Well, I thought it was interesting, too, in researching that, in the same county in 2019, a man named Raymond Lazarine, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, it could be Lazarin, but he used that same defense of sleepwalking when he was accused of killing his wife, and he was convicted of that. So nobody bought it.
No, it is amazing. You could look at it either way, and him having sleep apnea and some of those things going on that, I mean, if you don't get enough rest, and that's one thing I'm real funny about my bedroom. I want that to be my sanctuary. I don't want to, I going from college, I had books and stuff everywhere. I studied all the time, kept stuff going. I don't want all that stuff in my bedroom. And I listened to Madonna one time, and she said that should be the most, you know, soft place in your house. And she described what she did. No TV, a bunch of plants and things like that.
A sanctuary.
Right. And just stops all the BS at the door. Get that out of here. You know?
A safe space. Yes, that's interesting. Well, in that one case where he was convicted, Mr. Lazarine, apparently he had quite the issue with drinking, and he had threatened to kill her multiple times before. But there had also been incidents where he had done stuff when he was kind of out of his mind. So it was possible. But going back to how we started this, I feel like that has to be in you to a certain extent. And I'm not passing judgment, but there's just part of me that said, you know, I've been angry. I've certainly done things I'm not proud of. And I know I'm capable of losing my temper and doing stuff I'm not proud of because I've done it before. But to like fantasize about hurting someone or having a fantasy about a weapon or being enamored with any kind of killing tool, I'm not passing judgment. I don't understand that because I don't relate to it, but it certainly seems to me like that could potentially play a role in why people do what they do. This man who claimed he was sleepwalking, who was history with alcohol, he also had a history of being violent and making threats. So it seems like it makes sense that he was convicted, even if he was not in his right mind. It was by his choice, by his behavior. How much of this, even if he was a kid on the spectrum, how much did he indulge in those fantasies? We don't really know what goes on behind the closed doors of his mind.
Right. And we don't know what goes on behind the closed doors of their house either. And that's what my heart breaks for this whole family. And that's another reason why we have to guard our thoughts too. But if he didn't see anything wrong with that and it was fantasy and, play acting and stuff, and, everybody doesn't have the same maturity level.
Right. And the whispering to the 911 call is creepy.
Yeah. Well, they say that. I think, and you could say whisper, and I could say soft talk.
Talking low.
Yeah. But still, I know me, I would be screaming everything in the world for someone to come over. And that none of this went by a cookbook.
Right. Well, and I wonder, well, is he normally a soft talker?
Yeah.
You know?
It seemed like he was kind of didn't.
Pass the potatoes, you know?
It had to be. It didn't seem like he got things all wound up and stuff. He seemed they said he was sarcastic and not in a bad way, that he was the funny one.
Okay. Goodness.
She was the artistic one. God bless his family.
Yeah. Well, a tragedy all the way around. And we appreciate you breaking that case down for us, Pam. I know it brings back some sad memories for you as well. But like we talk about over and over again, we're about bringing victim stories to our audience so that people can learn from them. These are extreme examples, but I think we all deal with tragedy in multiple ways in our own lives.
Right. And believe it or not, even though this is a hard thing to go through, it does help me to process some of the feelings that I'm not so weird for having these feelings.
Absolutely not. All right. Well, thank you so much, Pam. And we thank you for joining us. That is it for this episode of Bloody Nightmare. Sleepwalking teen Benjamin Elliott stabs his twin sister to death in a waking nightmare. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to our director, editor, and production engineer, James Roy. Remember, you can always listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And you can also watch right here on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. Just don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law.